Hey guys, before we get started, you know the routine. Currently 80% of you have not hit the subscribe button, and while you're at it, please give us a like. And for those of you that already have, we appreciate your support. This week's match was basically a game 2 of last week, and for those of you that missed that video, go over and watch it. And with that being said, let's move on and introduce the commanders. Today we have Ray on Nicol Bolas. This is a Grixis Super Friends deck that looks to control and take over the board. It also plays some stacks pieces and proliferates and looks to overwhelm the table. Once this commander gets going, it's hard to stop. Next up, we have our last game's winner, Toralf. The idea behind this deck is that it plays big spells with damage doublers, using Toralf's non-combat damage to overwhelm and kill its opponents with ease. After that, we have Sam on Jodah. This is a Wooburg commander that has a lot of versatility in its kit. It plays really large spells for Wooburg and Cascade pieces that make the deck impossible to stop once it gets going. It also plays Omniscience, so it can cast spells up to 12 mana for free. Next up, we have me on Slicer. This is a Voltron commander that puts out Slicer, and then attempts to smack my opponents fast with equipments and stacks pieces. It looks to spread the commander damage around board and make it hard to deal with. And with all that out of the way, let's move on to the game. Welcome to Game Day's Commander. Let's get started. I win the high roll and go first. I draw for turn and play a mountain and pass the turn to Sam. Sam draws for turn and plays a training center and passes the turn to Ray. Ray draws for turn and plays a Frostboil Snarl, revealing a mountain and passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan draws for turn and plays a mountain and passes the turn to me. I draw for turn and play a War Room. I tap 2 mana and cast a Sword of the Animus and pass the turn to Sam. Sam draws for turn and plays a Takenuma, then taps for 2 mana and casts a Simic Signet, and passes the turn to Ray. Ray draws for turn and plays a mountain, and passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan draws for turn and plays a mountain, and taps 2 mana and casts an Arcane Signet. Dylan passes the turn to me. I untap and draw for turn. I tap a mountain and cast a Ragavan, and pass the turn to Sam. Sam untaps and draws for turn. Sam plays Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, making all lands tap for Forest. Sam taps 2 mana and casts Sylvan Library. After that, he taps 2 more mana and casts a Rampant Growth. He searches for a basic land and puts in a Plains tapped and passes the turn to Ray. Ray draws for turn and plays a Blood Crypt, paying 2 life to have it come in untapped. Ray taps 3 mana and casts Rhystic Study. Dylan responds by tapping his Arcane Signet and casting a Pyroblast. Pyroblast resolves and Rhystic Study is countered. Ray passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. Dylan taps 4 mana, taking 2 damage from Ancient Tomb, and casts an Unexpected Windfall. It resolves and Dylan discards Chain Reaction, drawing 2 cards and making 2 treasures. Dylan passes the turn to me. I untap and draw for turn. I move to combat and swing Ragavan at Sam. Sam has no blocks and takes 2 damage from Ragavan. Sam will exile the top of his library, exiling a land. I make a treasure token. I tap 2 mana, then sack my treasure token and cast Slicer for his more than meets the eye cost, and pass the turn to Sam. Sam untaps, and at the draw step, he will draw 2 additional cards from Sylvan Library. Sam will keep the 2 additional cards and will take 8 life. Sam will tap 4 mana and cast his commander, Jodah. Sam plays a Boseiju for land, and taps 2 mana and casts a Gruul Signet. After that, he passes the turn to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray pays 3 mana and casts Dak Faden. Ray will use its -2 ability to take control of Slicer. Ray moves to combat and swings Slicer at Sam. Sam declares no blocks and takes 3 damage from Slicer. At the end of combat, Slicer will convert. Ray passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan untaps and at the upkeep, he gains control of Slicer. Dylan draws for turn. Dylan plays a land for turn. Dylan taps 1 mana and casts a Sol Ring. Dylan taps 4 mana and casts his commander, Toralf. Dylan moves to combat and swings Slicer at me. I have no blocks and take 6 commander damage from Slicer. Dylan passes the turn over to me. I untap and at the upkeep I gain control of Slicer. I draw for turn. I tap 2 mana and attach Sword of the Animus to Slicer. I move to combat and swing Ragavan at Ray and Slicer at Sam. Ray declares no blocks and takes 2 from Ragavan. Ray will exile the top card of his library and I make a treasure. Sam declares no blocks and takes 8 damage from Slicer. Sword of the Animus will trigger, fetching me a land for the attack trigger. Unfortunately, during the time of recording, I was only supposed to get 1 trigger and not 2 since it's an attack trigger and not a damage trigger. but for the sake of the rest of the video, we will acknowledge the mistake and move on. I pass the turn to Sam. Sam untaps, and at the upkeep, he will gain control of Slicer. At the draw step, Sam will draw 2 additional cards. He will put the 2 cards back. Sam moves to combat and swings Slicer at Dylan and Jodah at Ray's Dak Faden. Dylan declares no blocks and takes 8 commander damage from Slicer. Sword of the Animus will trigger, grabbing me a land. Ray has no blocks and Dak Faden will die. Sam passes the turn over to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray moves to combat and swings Slicer at Sam. Sam responds by tapping 7 mana and casts an overloaded Cyclonic Rip. Dylan also has a response and taps 2 mana and casts a Reverberate targeting the Cyclonic Rift. Sam responds by exiling an Inspired Ultimatum and casts Force of Will. It will resolve and Sam will bounce all non-land permanents he doesn't control back to the owner's hands. After that, Ray passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan untaps and draws for turn. Dylan taps 1 mana and casts Soul Ring. Dylan taps his Soul Ring and casts an Arcane Signet. Dylan taps 4 mana, taking 2 damage from Ancient Tomb, and casts his commander, Toralf. Dylan passes the turn to me. I untap and draw for turn. I tap 3 mana and cast Slicer for his more than meets the eye cost. I tap 1 mana and cast Prying Blade. I tap 1 more mana and cast a Ragavan. I tap my War Room and play a Voyager Staff. I move to combat and swing Slicer at Ray. Ray has no blocks and takes 3 commander damage from Slicer. At the end of combat, Slicer will convert. I pass the turn to Sam. Sam untaps, and at the upkeep, he gains control of Slicer. At the draw step, he will draw 2 additional cards off his Sylvan Library. Sam will pay 4 life, keeping 1 and putting the other back on top of his library. Sam plays a forest for turn. Sam taps 5 mana. Using Jodah's ability, he casts Avacyn. It will resolve. Then Sam will tap 2 mana and cast Azorius Signet. Sam moves to combat and attacks Slicer at Dylan. Dylan declares no blocks and takes 6 commander damage from Slicer. Sam passes the turn to Ray. Ray untaps, and at the upkeep, he gains control of Slicer. Ray draws for turn. Ray taps 3 mana and casts a Frantic Search, drawing 2 cards, then discarding 2 cards. Ray discards Ugin, and then Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh. Ray will untap 3 lands. Ray plays a Swamp for turn. He taps 4 mana and casts his commander, Nicol Bolas the Ravager. It will resolve, and on ETB, everyone will discard a card. Sam discards an Essica. I discard a Darksteel Plate. Dylan discards an Anger of the Gods. Ray moves to combat and swings Slicer at Sam. Sam blocks with his Avacyn. Slicer dies and goes back to my command zone. Ray passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan untaps and draws for turn. Dylan taps 4 mana and casts Sulfime. It will resolve. Dylan will tap 4 mana, taking 2 damage from Ancient Tomb, and cast a Shatter Skull Smashing where X equals 2. Dylan will do 2 damage to my Ragavan, which will trigger Sulfime to do double damage and dealing 4 instead, killing my Ragavan. Toralf will trample the 3 excess non-combat damage over to Jodah, which will double due to Sulfime, dealing 6 damage. And what this will do is trample with Toralf over an infinite amount of times, creating new instances of damage with Sulfime. And since Jodah has Indestructible, it cannot die. Then Dylan will finally trample it over to Nicol Bolas, killing it, and then use the remaining infinite damage and throw it at my face, killing me on the spot. After that, Dylan will pass the turn to Sam. Sam untaps, and at the draw step, Sylvan Library will draw him 2 additional cards. He decides not to keep. Sam taps 3 mana and casts a Ristic Study. Sam moves to combat and swings Jodah and Avacyn at Dylan. Dylan declares no blocks and takes 4 commander damage from Jodah and 8 from Avacyn. Sam passes the turn over to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray passes the turn to Dylan. Dylan untaps and draws for turn. Dylan taps 2 mana and casts Cadiz. Ristic Study will trigger and Dylan will pay for it. Dylan will tap 5 mana and cast Reforge the Soul. Ristic Study will trigger and Dylan will not pay for it. Ray has a response and will flash in a Notion Thief. Ristic Study will trigger and Ray cannot pay for it. Notion Thief resolves and Ray will draw 21 cards. After that, Dylan will move to combat and swing Toralf and Sulfime at Ray. Ray declares no blocks and takes 5 commander damage from Toralf. Sam will also take 5 damage because of Cadiz. Ray takes 5 from Sulfime. Dylan passes the turn over to Sam. Sam untaps and will not draw 2 additional cards off a Sylvan Library because of Notion Thief. Sam will move to combat and swing Jodah at Dylan and Avacyn at Ray. Dylan declares no blocks and takes 4 commander damage from Sam. Ray also declares no blocks and takes 8 from Avacyn. Sam passes the turn to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. Ray taps Ancient Tomb, taking 2 damage and casts a Soul Ring. Ray then taps out for 6 mana with the 1 floating from Ancient Tomb and casts an Overloaded Cyclonic Rift. Ray will then move to combat and swing 3 at Dylan, taking him down to 1 life. Ray will pass the turn, discarding down to hand size. Dylan will untap and draw for turn. Dylan wants to surrender but allows Sam to get off 1 thing before he dies, and lets Sam get off his Mystical Tutor. It resolves and Sam puts an instant or sorcery on top of his deck, putting a Vindicate on top. Then Dylan will tap his Ancient Tomb, killing himself. Sam will untap and draw for turn. Sam will pay 3 mana and cast Vindicate, targeting Notion Thief. It resolves and Notion Thief will die. Sam taps 2 mana and casts an Azorius Signet, and 2 more mana for Simic Signet. Sam passes the turn to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray plays an island for turn. Ray taps 6 mana and casts his commander, Nicol Bolas. It resolves and Sam discards a Sylvan Library. Ray taps an Ancient Tomb, taking 2 life and casts a Felwar Stone. Ray passes the turn back to Sam. Sam untaps and draws for turn. Sam taps 2 mana and casts a Gruul Signet. Sam taps 4 mana and casts his commander, Jodah. After that, Sam taps 3 more mana and casts a Rhystic Study. Sam passes the turn back to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray taps 7 mana, taking 2 from Ancient Tomb, and transforms his commander, Nicol Bolas the Ravager, into Nicol Bolas the Arisen. After that, Ray will use its -4 ability to return target creature or planeswalker from the graveyard back to the field, and he chooses Nicol Bolas Planeswalker. Ray will use its -2 ability to steal Sam's Jodah. Ray plays a Swamp for turn. Ray taps for a blue mana and casts a Preordain. He will scry 2, and then he will bottom 1 card, and then draw. Ray passes the turn over to Sam. Sam untaps and draws for turn. Sam taps 3 mana and casts Cultivate. Cultivate resolves and Sam searches out for 2 planes, putting 1 in tapped and the other in his hand. Sam plays a Plains for turn. Sam passes the turn over to Ray. Ray untaps and draws for turn. Ray uses Nicol Bolas Planeswalker +3 ability to destroy Sam's Rhystic Study. Ray will then use his commander's +2 ability to draw 2 cards. Ray will tap 6 mana and cast Bolas' Citadel. It will resolve. Ray pays 5 life to cast Tezzeret off the top of his deck. After that resolves, Ray will use its +1 ability to make a 1/1 Thopter. Ray moves to combat and swings Jodah at Sam. Sam declares no blocks and takes 4 commander damage off of Jodah. Ray moves to end step and discards to hand size. Sam untaps and draws for turn. Sam taps for a blue and casts a Ponder. Looking at the top 3 and putting them back in any order, he decides to shuffle and draw a card. Sam taps 10 mana and then casts Apex Devastator. It will resolve and Sam will cascade 4 times. For his first cascade, he gets an Izzet Signet. For his second cascade, he will get a Jinga Taxis. His third cascade is a Chromatic Orrery. And his fourth and final cascade is a Reanimate. Ray will respond to the Reanimate with a Flusterstorm, where the storm cost is 6 and Reanimate will get countered. Sam will then tap for 8 mana and cast Avacyn. Sam moves to end step and draws 7 cards off of Jinga Taxis. However, Sam accepts defeat and scoops up, giving the victory to Ray. Overall, a very good game, and in the end, Nicol Bolas is just too strong. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. GG, Ray.